There was no secret marriage, no daughter hidden away somewhere. On the TV screen, my husband faced countless flashing lights, speaking each word clearly and coldly. I froze in place, while my 3-year-old daughter, Lily, looked up at me with confusion. "Mom, what is Dad saying? Does Dad not like me anymore?" At that moment, my phone vibrated softly. I glanced down and saw an unread message sent 6 days ago, a glaring photo of a male vasectomy certificate, accompanied by a brief note. "As long as you're willing, Lily will be my only child from now on." On the screen, Francis's handsome but cold face filled the frame. The navy tie he wore that day was the one I had carefully picked out. A subtle, hidden pattern, a gift for our 4th wedding anniversary. Back then, I thought he at least liked it. Now, he pushed his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose, his thin lips parting slightly as he spoke clearly to the camera. "There is no secret marriage, nor any daughter." My hand holding the remote tightened until my knuckles turned white. He paused, then added, as if speaking to the whole world, but also deliberately to me through the screen, "As everyone knows, I have been single all these years." His tone was calm and steady, yet harsher than any scolding I had heard before. Finally, his gaze grew stern, as if warning some unseen enemy. "I advise those with ill intentions not to indulge in wild fantasies and bring disgrace upon themselves." After speaking, he stood up. Bodyguards and assistants immediately surrounded him, blocking the reporters and escorting him into a waiting car. I stared blankly and pressed the power button. The living room light dimmed as the screen went dark, leaving only the floor lamp in the corner casting a faint yellow glow. The room felt especially lonely. In the heavy silence, a faint sob came from the stairway, soft and delicate, like a kitten's whimper, piercing straight into my ears. I suddenly turned and saw Lily, my 3-year-old daughter, standing barefoot on the stair landing. She wore her pajamas, her little face streaked with tears, staring blankly at me. Her small shoulders trembled. "Lily," I whispered, quickly rising to hold her in my arms. "Why aren't you asleep? Did you sneak down? Usually, she would be fast asleep by now." Her damp little face buried itself against my chest, her small mouth pouted as she asked, her voice thick with sadness, "Mom, why does Dad say he doesn't have a daughter?" Her tiny hand clutched tightly at the front of my nightgown. "He doesn't have a daughter, then what is Lily?" My heart squeezed painfully, making it almost hard to breathe. Francis is a man of few words. Though he cares for Lily, his affection feels more like an obligation, routine and distant. He spends little time at home, and when he is there, his expression is always stern. Lily is close to him but also a little afraid. Her temperament is more sensitive than other children. That year, when the wisteria bloomed in the old house, Grandpa made the final decision about Francis and me. I was foolish then, thinking that if I tried hard enough, even a cold stone could be warmed. But after 4 years, this stone seemed to grow colder and colder. The night before his business trip, he wore that same style of tie, the one he has on now, which I chose. He had many ties, but he tied my wrists with them, ignoring my tears and protests, tormenting me through most of the night. He called it a kind of intimacy, but all I felt was humiliation. Later, I bit his neck in desperation. Thinking back, that bite mark probably hasn't faded yet. That's just how he is. Outwardly, Francis is self-disciplined and restrained, but once the door closes, he becomes someone insatiably demanding. I touched my daughter's soft hair, gently wiping away her tear stains, trying bit by bit to steady her. "Lily, do you want to leave here with Mom?" She lifted her little face from my arms, her big eyes still filled with tears, and asked, confused, "Where are we going? Will we still go home later?" I lowered my eyes and forced a smile, one more pitiful than any crying. "We won't go back," I said softly, looking into her eyes. "This is not our home. This is Francis's home. We've stayed here a long time and have disturbed him enough. Now, it's time for us to go back to our own home." Lily nodded, half understanding, and said in a soft, childlike voice, "Lily listens to Mommy. Wherever Mommy goes, Lily goes. Good girl," I whispered as I held her close and carried her back to her room. I gently laid her on the bed and tucked the blanket around her. She fell asleep quickly, her small face still stained with dried tears. My eyes drifted to the photo frame on her bedside table. It held the only picture of the three of us, taken just after Lily's first birthday. In it, Francis sat upright with that familiar distant look. I was smiling, a little shyly, holding Lily in my arms. My body leaned ever so slightly toward Francis, while he remained stiff and straight, leaving a tiny space between us. I picked up the frame and quietly walked out of Lily's room. Back in the master bedroom, I took a pair of scissors from the drawer. Following the subtle gap between our bodies in the photo, I cut it cleanly in two. The crisp snip echoed softly. That tiny space, so easily missed back then, now seemed like a quiet warning. The distance had always been there. It had just taken time for me to see it. I kept the half with Lily and me, and tossed his half into the bottom drawer without a second thought. Just then, my phone lit up, a message from 6 days ago. I had ignored it until now. I tapped it open. It was an electronic receipt for a vasectomy. Below it, just one simple line: "As long as you are willing, Lily will be my only child." The sender, Stanley. Tears slid down my cheeks before I could stop them, landing on the cold screen, blurring the words. The obsession and weight I had carried for years seemed, in that moment, to dissolve, like dust in the wind. That night, Francis came back from a week-long business trip. The night outside was dark, thick as ink. In the past, Lily and I would wait up for him, sometimes even until dawn, but not tonight. Lily had gone to bed early after her bath, and I had moved into the guest room on the second floor. The air on the terrace was cool. I sat by the window, staring at my phone. That same message from Stanley still glowed on the screen. The receipt, the quiet, heavy promise. Then I heard the sound of a car engine shutting off downstairs, followed by the steady, familiar footsteps of Francis entering the house. He went upstairs first, probably to the master bedroom. After a short while, his footsteps came back down and stopped outside my door. "Cecilia, open the door." His voice came through, flat and unreadable. I quickly hid the phone under the pillow, wiped my face, and cleared my throat. "I'm going to sleep," I said, keeping my tone steady. "If you need anything, we can talk tomorrow." But before I finished speaking, I heard the click of the lock. He had used the spare key. Of course he had. This was his house. He never needed permission. He stood in the doorway, the hallway light behind him casting his tall figure in shadow. "Why did you move to the guest room?" His voice held something unspoken. Maybe I was just imagining it. I sat up and looked at him calmly. He looked tired, the long flight showing in the crease between his brows. As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead gently, his voice slightly hoarse. Whatever trace of concern still lingered in my heart, I forced it down. I turned away and looked out into the dark night. "I have not been feeling well these past few days. I did not want to get you sick. I don't care about that. I'm moving back." He walked over to the bed. When I did not move, a slight crease appeared between his brows. He stood there, his fingers lightly tapping along the seam of his pants. "Cecilia, I want to sleep now. You should rest too." I pulled the blanket up to my chest. He did not say another word. Instead, he bent down and lifted me into his arms. "It's been a week. Don't you miss me?" He lowered his head to kiss me. His breath carried the familiar scent of cedar, with a faint trace of travel. I turned my head just in time. His lips brushed against my temple. He paused. The warmth left his face, replaced by something cold, like the surface of a frozen lake. "Cecilia," he said, his grip tightening around my arm. "What kind of tantrum are you throwing?" In the 4 years we had been married, I had never refused him, not once, especially not when he returned from business trips. Those were the only times I saw even a hint of emotion in his eyes, something more than duty. But now, I felt nothing. My body was frozen. The fire in my heart had long gone out, extinguished by his own hands. I pulled myself free from his arms. My feet touched the ground, and I felt strangely steady. "Francis, let's separate." The words left my lips, and even I was shocked. We had a child together. And yet, the only word I could find was separate. We did not even have a red marriage certificate. Not even that. He froze. Then, as if I had told him the most ridiculous joke, a cold smirk curled at the corners of his mouth. But his eyes, they were sharp, icy, filled with something that stung. "Because of what I said to the media." "Not just that," I replied quietly, my voice almost drifting. Maybe if you had only denied the marriage, I could have come up with 1,000 excuses, but you denied Lily too. Every night since then, when I closed my eyes, all I could see was Lily's face. Confused, hurt, her big eyes full of tears. Yes, I said softly, that was all I could manage, just that one word. He loosened his tie and walked to the window, turning his back to me. You know that was just a temporary solution to deal with the media, he said. I am very busy. I do not have time to comfort you over something so trivial. Then he turned around, lifted his hand, and tapped his temple with his finger, as if to say my feelings were irrational and not worth considering. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the hand hanging at my side had curled into a fist. My nails were digging painfully into my palm. I am not looking for your comfort, I said quietly. I am being serious. I took a deep breath. Forget the agreement. I only want Lily. The scorn in Francis's eyes grew stronger. He stepped closer, 2 slow steps, looking down at me like I was someone foolish enough to challenge him. You are using Lily to threaten me, he asked, voice sharp, trying to force me to reveal your relationship to the public. Hers too. He let out a cold laugh. I told you before. That is not going to happen. Not now, not for the next few years. Absolutely impossible. His tone left no space for negotiation. Cecilia, I can tolerate many things from you, but not this. This is not up for discussion. The room was warm, the thermostat clearly on, but I felt a cold chill crawling up from the soles of my feet. It climbed up my spine and wrapped around my chest, sharp enough to make my teeth ache. Back when I first signed the agreement and moved into his house, my best friend had taken my hand and hesitated before speaking. Cecilia, a man like Francis is impossible to warm. And what did I say back then? I had smiled, tapped my chest with pride, and replied with all the stubborn hope of someone in love. Even if he is made of stone, I will warm him. Water wears down stone eventually. Looking back now, it was laughable. A stone will always be a stone, no matter how long you try to warm it. In the end, it only leaves you bruised and cold. Francis probably took my silence as fear. His voice softened slightly, but still held a commanding edge. Think about it tonight. Once you are ready, move back into the master bedroom. Then he turned and left. The sound of the door closing behind him was louder than usual, not his usual controlled, quiet exit. It was heavier, sharper. I lay back on the bed, pulled the covers over me, and shut my eyes. Forget it. I would wait a few more days. Just until Grandpa returned from his convalescence in the south. It had been him who made the decision to pair me with Francis back then. If he agreed now, maybe I could finally take Lily and leave. Francis's mother, who always favored boys over girls, never liked Lily. She looked at her like a burden. If I wanted to take away what she saw as a useless child, she would probably be glad. The next day, she came to see me. She wore an elegant, tailored suit, her hair styled neatly. She held a cup of ginseng tea prepared by the servant and sat down across from me with perfect grace. She asked about Lily in a light, distant tone, almost like an afterthought, before I could answer. She sipped her tea and slowly began to speak. The soft clink of the teacup meeting the saucer sounded precise, deliberate, like the opening notes of a well-rehearsed performance. You must have heard what Francis said in front of the media that day. Yes, she set the cup down gently, her fingertips tracing the delicate gold pattern on the rim. I nodded without a word. A faint smile played on her lips, a touch too satisfied. To be honest, I did not expect Francis to be so direct, she said. All these years, there have been whispers, of course, but he never cared to deny them, never took any of it seriously. She paused, her eyes meeting mine with a deeper meaning. But this time was different, wasn't it? I heard Freya finalized her divorce, and soon after, Francis went out of his way to clear things up about you. Finally gave an answer, even if it was vague. Freya, that name had always floated quietly through the background of our lives, the daughter-in-law she had once preferred. I only knew she got engaged early and married not long after. She and Francis ran into each other at the occasional event, just acquaintances, or so I thought. Only now did I realize he had never stopped thinking about her, so that was the reason. Back then, when he agreed to the marriage Grandpa arranged and signed the contract with me, it was not because I meant anything to him, it was because the woman he loved had chosen someone else. I was just convenient, quiet, a decorative presence in a life already shaped by someone else's shadow. My mother-in-law sighed, pretending to be regretful. She picked up a small silver spoon and gently stirred her tea. The faint sound it made filled the quiet room. But I never expected he wouldn't even recognize Lily, she said softly. That child, she is loyal. He liked Freya from the time he was a teenager. Even when Freya married someone else, he did not let go. When he agreed to be with you, I thought he had finally moved on. I sat frozen. My ears ringing like a swarm of bees had taken up residence in my skull. Her words came through in pieces, sharp and dull at the same time. Cecilia, she said suddenly, her voice growing serious. She reached across and patted the back of my hand. Her fingers were smooth and cool, her nails perfectly trimmed. You have always been a clever girl. You know your position. You have no name, no status. That might not bother you. But what about Lily? You would not want your daughter to live her whole life like this, would you? In the shadows, hidden, never allowed to step into the light, she picked up her teacup again and took another elegant sip. As if what she had just said was nothing more than a polite comment about the weather. After she left, the room felt quieter than ever. The entire villa fell into a heavy silence. Sunlight streamed through the tall floor-to-ceiling windows, casting soft, mottled shadows on the floor, on the flower stand near the wall. A few delicate orchid petals had fallen without a sound, curling and withering where they landed. I took out my phone and opened the messages Stanley had sent me. One line stood out, burning into my mind. As long as you are willing, Lily will be my only child from now on. Tears welled up before I realized it, blurring the screen. I sniffled quietly, my fingers trembling as I typed back a reply. Come pick me up. I do not want to stay in this house anymore. The moment I hit send, it felt as if the weight that had been pressing on my chest for years finally lifted, even if only a little. It was still heavy, but now, at least. A small crack of light had broken through the darkness. I did not wait for Grandpa to come home. The next morning, I began packing Lily's things and my own. We were preparing to leave. The servants in the house seemed to sense something. They looked uneasy and whispered among themselves. Someone must have called Francis. He arrived just as the moving truck I had called was loading the last suitcase into the back. The driver closed the door with a thud, and the truck's engine hummed low in the background. Stanley's plane would land in 3 hours. He would come for us. Lily and I would be leaving to start a new life somewhere far away from all this. Francis stepped out of his black Bentley, his face dark and tense. He looked like a storm was brewing behind his eyes. Standing in the fading light of dusk, his gaze met mine, cold and unreadable, like a pair of frozen lakes. Lily shrank into my arms, clearly frightened. She clung to my neck tightly. Burying her face in my shoulder, I pressed a kiss to her forehead and gently whispered that everything would be all right. Then I handed her to the nanny, asking her to take Lily to play for a while. Once Lily had left, Francis slowly walked toward me. His steps were heavy, his brows drawn tightly together. Though his expression was calm, there was an unmistakable irritation simmering beneath the surface. He tugged at his collar, as if struggling to breathe. Cecilia, he said slowly. Have I been too lenient with you these past few years? I forced a calm smile and gave him a slight nod. Thank you for taking care of us, I said softly. Truly, I meant it. He had given us everything except love, and for that, I held no resentment. He took a step closer, almost standing right in front of me. Think carefully, he said, his tone low. If you leave this place, you and Lily will have nothing. I met his eyes and asked quietly, and if I stay, what are we then? My voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a thin blade. His face twitched ever so slightly, caught off guard. What are you still unhappy about? He asked, clearly frustrated. Aside from a name, what have I not given you? He gestured broadly with his hands, as if the house, the wealth, the life he offered should have been enough. Yes, I had been with him for 4 years. He had not taken any other woman during that time. We even had a daughter, inside this house. The servants called me madam, but outside, I was just a woman he kept in the shadows. People whispered behind my back. The socialites called Lily an illegitimate child. I could not even say her name out loud at public events. I looked at him and said clearly, I do not want anything else, I just want to leave. With my daughter, is that so wrong? Maybe it was my determination that finally pushed him too far. His voice turned cold, sharp, like ice cracking underfoot. Move your things, and hers, back into the house, he said. I will act like none of this ever happened. He pinched the bridge of his nose and took a deep breath, clearly trying to hold back his anger. What if I say no? I asked, meeting his gaze without hesitation. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he growled through clenched teeth, if you walk out that door today, do not ever come back. Just then, his phone rang. The sound was loud and jarring in the quiet courtyard. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted slightly. The deep crease between his brows softened, and some of the tension around him faded. He stepped to the side to answer. Though he lowered his voice, I still caught bits and pieces. Don't be afraid, I'll be there soon. Send me the address, 20 minutes. His tone was gentle, too gentle. It could only be Freya. Only she made him speak like that. After hanging up, Francis turned toward his car. He walked a few steps before remembering I was still standing there. He turned back briefly, then gave a quick order to the servant beside him, his voice once again cold and emotionless. Move all their things back before I return tonight. Make sure everything in the house is clean and in place. Then his eyes fell on me. The look in them firm, commanding. You will move back into the master bedroom tonight. You are no longer allowed to stay in the guest room. He said it without emotion. I did not argue, I just stood there, quietly watching him, the way I had so many times before. Perhaps Francis thought I would lower my head and accept it like always, staying silent, obeying him as he had come to expect. He did not stay a moment longer. He turned, got into the car, and started the engine. The low rumble of it echoed against the stone driveway before he disappeared into the fading light of dusk. The servants exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, the nanny stepped forward with a cautious smile. Madam, you should go back to your room and get some rest. We will take care of the luggage for you. As she spoke, they were getting ready to unload my suitcase from the moving truck. I raised my hand to stop them. No need. We are leaving right away. Several of them gasped at the same time. I kept my gaze lowered, hiding the last flicker of emotion in my eyes. My voice stayed calm, but firm. If Mr. Francis comes back, please tell him. I paused for a moment, then looked up at the heavy, elaborate front door of his house. In the fading light, it looked like the mouth of some cold, silent creature. Tell him, just as he said, Lily and I will never step foot in this house again. This is not our home. It never was. With those words, I turned and left. I carried Lily in my arms, walked out of that suffocating mansion, and climbed into the car Stanley had sent for us. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The air even seemed lighter. Lily, probably tired from all the confusion or perhaps simply because children forget quickly, soon leaned against me and fell asleep. As I looked down at her peaceful little face, something inside me softened. The ice that had formed around my heart, shaped by Francis and his mother, began to melt, just a little. The car stopped in front of a hotel that looked elegant and welcoming. Stanley's assistant, a capable young woman, greeted us and helped settle our luggage. She gently asked if Lily had any food allergies, explaining that Mr. Stanley had asked the kitchen to prepare a special children's meal. I carried Lily to the bed and tucked her in. The room was spacious, decorated in a subtle, refined style. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights stretched far into the night. But I had no interest in the view. My heart was restless, filled with thoughts of Stanley. The news about his surgery lingered in my mind like a heavy stone. I did not know when he had made that decision or what had been going through his head when he did. I was still lost in my thoughts when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. When I opened the door, Stanley was standing there. He had a coat draped over one arm and wore a simple dark shirt and trousers. He had lost weight. His features looked sharper now, more defined, but he still stood tall. Time had taken away the awkwardness of youth and left behind a calm, steady man. But the way he looked at me had not changed. His eyes were warm and gentle, just like when we were children. Cecilia, his voice was low and slightly hoarse. I watched his Adam's apple move as he spoke, and my nose began to sting with the urge to cry. Just as I was about to call out "Brother Stanley," he stepped forward and pulled me into his arms. His embrace was firm and strong. I could barely breathe. But I felt the faint tremble in his arms and the rapid beat of his heart. 4 years, a full 4 years had passed. He let go quickly, cupped my face, and roughly wiped the tears I had not even realized had fallen. "All right, no more crying," he said softly. "I am here now, everything is going to be fine," I sniffled, wanting to ask about the surgery, wanting to ask about his uncle and aunt, but the words got stuck in my throat. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say, but in the end, only one came out. "Why have you lost so much weight?" Stanley smiled and gently took my wrist. He led me inside and closed the door behind us. Leaning back against it, he looked at me with a complex expression. "Jet lag, long hours on the road," he said softly, then he paused, his eyes drifting to my empty ring finger. His gaze darkened for a moment before returning to normal. "What about Lily? She's asleep," I said, pointing to the bed in the other room. He nodded but said nothing more. It was as if the 4 years apart had never happened, as if I had just gone on a short trip and returned home today. For a while, we said nothing. I nervously played with the edge of my sleeve, unsure of how to break the silence. Stanley spoke first. "Are you hungry? Should I have the kitchen send something up?" I shook my head. "No need, I am not hungry." He did not insist, he just looked at me quietly, his eyes filled with warmth. That steady gaze made my cheeks feel hot. Then, his phone vibrated in his coat pocket, cutting through the quiet moment. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and walked over to the window to answer. His voice was soft, but I still caught fragments of the conversation. "Dr. Chen, yes, I understand. In this case, roughly when will there be any improvement? Will it all be lost in the future?" I could not catch the rest, but the strain in his voice made my heart ache. When he hung up and turned around, he saw my pale face and paused. "Cecilia. What is it?" My voice trembled. "Brother Stanley, what did you just say to the doctor?" Thinking about that vasectomy certificate, a terrifying thought took hold in my mind. Stanley's expression shifted too. He came closer, placing his hands gently on my shoulders, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's nothing serious, just some normal questions about post-surgery recovery. Don't overthink it." I looked it up myself. Tears began streaming down my face uncontrollably. "Isn't that kind of surgery supposed to have little effect on that area?" I asked. He was silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. With a touch as gentle as handling a fragile treasure, he wiped away my tears. "There are exceptions to everything. Cecilia, maybe I just had bad luck." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The doctor didn't have any definite conclusions. He only said I should find a girlfriend and try again." My mind went completely blank. Find a girlfriend and try again. What did that mean? Could it be that because of the surgery, he really couldn't anymore? For me, for Lily, he had paid such a price. What I owed him, I could never repay in this lifetime. "Don't overthink it, it's nothing serious," Stanley said, smiling at me. But no matter how I looked at that smile, I saw a trace of bitterness and reluctance behind it. He gently rubbed my hair. "We've managed to get through every year, even before all this. How can this not be a big deal?" I almost shouted, tears flowing more fiercely. For a man, losing that ability must be a huge blow and humiliation. Stanley's gaze deepened. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "Cecilia, if you're worried about whether your future will be happy, I'll be glad. If it's anything else, I really don't care." He reached out and touched my cheek softly. "You know I've always been like this, somewhat cold, somewhat selfish. Except when it comes to you, I don't care much about anything else. So please don't pity me." After saying this, he picked up the coat draped over the sofa. "I'm going out for some fresh air. You behave and keep Lily company. I'll be back soon." The door closed softly behind him. Leaving me alone, I collapsed onto the sofa, my heart tangled in a mess. If Stanley was really suffering because of me, I bit my lip hard, the metallic taste of blood spreading in my mouth. A wild thought grew in my mind. Then I would marry him. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone looking down on him or despising him. In this life, I would stay by his side. I don't know how much time passed before Stanley returned. He looked tired, his eyes bloodshot and his face flushed unusually. "Brother Stanley, Do you have a fever? I reached out to feel his forehead, but he grabbed my wrist firmly. His palm was burning hot, startling me. It's nothing, he said, his voice a little slurred as he pulled me into the room. His steps were unsteady, maybe he'd caught a chill. He dragged himself to the bedside but swayed and almost fell. I quickly steadied him. If you're really unwell, let's go to the hospital. He shook his head, sweat beading on his forehead. His breathing was heavy. Cecilia, he suddenly lowered his head, pressing his hot forehead against mine. The heat was astonishingly intense. I panicked. What's wrong? Is it a side effect from the surgery? He looked at me with a dazed gaze, struggling to focus. I don't know, it feels like there's a fire burning inside my body. He breathed heavily, his forehead brushing against my cheek and the side of my neck. The wave of heat almost swallowed me whole. Brother Stanley, my heart ached unbearably. I was utterly panicked. In this state, he was clearly very uncomfortable. It had to be that surgery. It just had to be. His dry, burning lips clumsily found mine and pressed softly against them. This kiss carried no desire. It was more like a plea for comfort, a need for support. My whole body stiffened. He seemed to notice and tried to pull away, his voice tinged with hurt and self-mockery. I'm sorry. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the guilt, heartache, and pity I had buried for years exploded out at once. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, my gaze was firm. I raised my hand and wrapped it around his neck, meeting his lips. Brother Stanley, my voice trembled but carried unwavering determination. Don't be afraid, I'll teach you. All right, he looked stunned. The deep red in his eyes reflected my small figure, swirling with shock, confusion, and a faint, barely noticeable desire. I didn't give him a chance to hesitate. I held him tightly. Pressing my body gently but firmly, I easily flipped him over and pinned his somewhat limp body onto the soft bed. A button on the cuff of his shirt had come undone, revealing a dark watch on his wrist. The soft lighting in the room reflected off his sweat-dampened hairline, sparkling with tiny flickers of light. Cecilia, he murmured my name, his voice hoarse and rough. The fire in his eyes burned brighter and brighter, almost ready to consume us both. I leaned down and whispered in his ear. Using all the tenderness I could find to soothe and guide him, I could feel the tension in his body and his labored, suppressed breathing. When it finally happened, I bit my own arm to keep the scream from escaping. White flashes flickered before my eyes. My body felt like it was floating on clouds and sinking beneath the sea all at once. I don't know how much time passed, but the heat radiating from him gradually faded. He held me as if I were a precious treasure lost and now found. The sound of water flowing came from the bathroom as he helped me wash, every movement careful and gentle amid the misty steam. He lifted me to sit on the wash basin, then slowly crouched in front of me. Cecilia, he looked up at me, his eyes clearer but carrying a trace of unease and guilt. I am afraid. Afraid I might have hurt you just now, and afraid I might not be able to make you feel good, he said softly. So, let's just stay like this for now. Is that all right? His hair was still damp with steam, and the look in his eyes was searching, cautious, almost pleading. My heart ached with a strange mix of sorrow and tenderness. I said nothing. Instead, I shook my head gently, reached out, and stroked his cheek with my fingertips. Near dawn, I lay curled against his shoulder, completely drained. Not even wanting to lift a finger, my voice came out hoarse, almost like a sigh after a storm. What is really wrong with you? Stanley tightened his arm around me, his voice laced with a faint guilt. Maybe I do have a slight fever, and I'm just really tired. I did not believe that weak excuse, not for a second. But in that moment, I no longer cared about the reason. It did not matter. Brother Stanley, I whispered, leaning close to his ear, using what little strength I had left. My voice was light as air. Let's get our marriage certificate tomorrow. All right. He froze for a second, then he held me even tighter. In the dark, his voice came through with a thick, nasal tone, heavy with emotion. Okay, first thing in the morning, the next day, I went to visit my grandfather in person. The old house looked the same as ever. In the yard, the century-old ginkgo tree had half its leaves turned yellow. With every breeze, golden leaves drifted down, rustling gently, covering the ground like a soft blanket of sunlight. My grandfather sat in his rattan chair, a thin blanket over his knees. He looked full of life. Sipping tea slowly. "Girl," he said as he looked at me, "have you really made up your mind?" I nodded, doing my best to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I've thought it through. Over the years, I've caused you worry. Worry." He waved his hand, the cane in his other hand tapping the ground lightly. "Don't talk nonsense. This is your home. If anyone owes anything, it is that boy Francis. He owes both you and Lily a proper apology." He paused and his eyes turned slightly red. "Your grandfather once saved my life. What I gave you has already gone far beyond what I owed him. You are family." My nose stung as emotion welled up. "From now on, I may not be able to visit often. Please take good care of yourself. If you have time, bring Lily back to see me," he said with a sigh. "The child is innocent. She carries our family's blood, and if you ever face trouble, do not carry it all by yourself." "I understand, Grandpa," I said softly. "Go ahead," he said with a wave of his hand, like he was letting go of a heavy weight. As the car drove through the old iron gate, golden sunlight poured in through the windows and lit up my face. Just then, in the lane next to us, a familiar black Bentley came to a sudden stop. "Francis." He stepped out of the car. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, the top buttons of his shirt undone, and his hair slightly tousled. He looked as though he had rushed here, but had nowhere left to go. I did not ask the driver to stop. We just drove right past him. In the rearview mirror, his figure grew smaller and smaller. He stood there alone, like a statue with no soul, still and silent. Even the agreement between us no longer meant anything. There was no need for final words. Separation came easier than I had ever imagined. Stanley was not waiting for me in the hotel lobby. I went straight upstairs and unlocked the door to our suite. Inside, Lily was sitting on the carpet, building blocks with Stanley, giggling with delight. "Mom," she cried, her little legs wobbling as she rushed over. Stanley stood up too, took the bag from my hand, and ruffled my hair casually. His eyes crinkled as he smiled. "Everything goes smoothly," I nodded. As I looked at him, the heavy stone in my chest finally dropped away. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. He pulled 2 red booklets from his pocket and held them up playfully like a child showing off candy. "Miss Cecilia," he said with a grin, "I look forward to your guidance from here on out." "Marriage certificates," I burst out laughing, took one from him, and opened it. In the photo, we stood close together, smiling just a little too brightly, awkward and sweet. Stanley quickly snapped a picture of the certificate with his phone and started typing something. A moment later, my phone started vibrating non-stop. He had posted on social media, "Married, have a daughter, do not disturb, wife, Cecilia, daughter, Lily." Below the caption, he attached the photo of our marriage certificate. The comment section exploded. He reached out and gently pinched my cheek again. "What, afraid I'll change my mind?" "Not at all," I replied with a calm smile. Though my heart was bubbling with warmth, just then, Bridget, his younger sister, came rushing into Francis's study, holding her phone tightly. Francis had just returned from the old family house. His face was pale, so pale it looked as though even the light had drained from it. He yanked at his tie in frustration. "Brother, look at this," Bridget said breathlessly. "Isn't this some kind of computer-generated photo?" Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the screen in front of him. Eyes wide with disbelief. "Stanley, how could he possibly marry Cecilia?" "Cecilia?" Francis's gaze dropped to the phone. On it, a glaring red marriage certificate stared back at him. Next to it were Stanley's words, "Married, has a daughter." It felt like a frozen blade plunged straight into his chest. He snatched the phone from Bridget and scrolled down with shaking fingers. There it was, a photo of Stanley holding Cecilia and Lily. Lily was grinning from ear to ear, her toothy smile full of joy. Cecilia leaned gently against Stanley's shoulder, her expression peaceful and relaxed. Something Francis had never seen from her before. "This has to be fake, right?" Bridget mumbled beside him, refusing to accept it. "Just a few days ago, when you were seen with Sister Freya, I ran into Cecilia at the mall. She was still buying things for you. She even asked the clerk about cufflinks. How could she be married to someone else all of a sudden?" Francis suddenly raised his head, his gaze sharp and direct. "Which day? What was she buying?" Bridget blinked, startled. It was that brand you like. She was looking at cufflinks and asked a few questions. But then something happened with the payment. The card didn't go through. Maybe. She said she didn't want them anymore and left. Cufflinks. Francis's ears rang. He remembered receiving a bank notification that day. A large purchase. But shortly after, there was another message showing the amount had been refunded. He had even called Cecilia about it. She had brushed it off with a casual tone, swiped the wrong card, paid again. Back then, he thought she was just annoyed with him, maybe throwing a quiet tantrum. He never imagined the truth was something else entirely. He stared at the photo again. Stanley was wearing a pale blue shirt. At the cuff, a 6-point star glinted subtly in the light. It was from a brand Francis recognized. But it was not a style he ever wore. It was something Cecilia would pick. Something he used to think she would buy for him. Only now did he realize. She had bought it. She just had not bought it for him. That thoughtful gift he believed she had returned was never for him in the first place. It had gone to another man. His hand tightened around the phone, the plastic creaking under the pressure. A deep, suffocating anger rose in his chest. "Brother, say something," Bridget whispered, tugging lightly at his sleeve. Francis shoved her hand away. His chest rising and falling rapidly. He remembered the day Cecilia left with Lily. The servants had given him strange looks. Hesitating to speak, he had thought they were overreacting. Then he remembered how, just days later, after publicly declaring himself single, he overheard hushed voices around the house. "Poor lady, I feel so bad for her. She always had such a gentle nature." He saw again in his mind the moment Cecilia stood before him, holding Lily's small hand, and said softly, "Francis, let's separate." Her eyes back then held no anger, no tears, just a silence so heavy, so final, it had pressed all the air from the room. Only now did he understand. "Giving up is the quietest thing a person can do. Give me the phone," he said through clenched teeth. He found Stanley's post and scrolled down to a comment from a mutual friend joking about stealing someone else's bride. Stanley had replied, "No choice, I was a bit late to make a move. Almost let her be held back by someone else. Lucky I'm young and strong, not like some people. 3 years older, all appearance, no substance, all appearance, no substance." Francis repeated the words under his breath again and again, his temples throbbing as if something inside was about to snap. He suddenly hurled the phone onto the desk. The screen struck the corner and went dark. Bridget gasped softly and tiptoed out of the room without making a sound. Francis stood there, suffocated by the air around him. He grabbed a pack of cigarettes and stumbled into the backyard. The garden had once been Cecilia's favorite place. She used to tend to the flowers with care and patience. Now the plants were wilting from neglect. A few late-blooming roses drooped under the weight of their own petals. He lit a cigarette, and the ember burned down to his fingertip before he even noticed. The sting brought him back. He dropped it on the ground and crushed it beneath his shoe. The warmth that had once filled this place, the laughter, the soft touches, the quiet meals, they were all gone. The people he thought would never leave him had already left. The wind blew through the garden, lifting a few dead leaves into the air. They spun, danced briefly, then drifted away, just like her, and there he stood, in the middle of it all, tasting for the first time what it meant to truly deserve the loneliness he had created. Days passed, quietly, like the growing rings of the old locust tree outside the window, layer by layer, slow and steady. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had gone by since Stanley and I were married. Lily had grown into a clever little girl who could braid her own hair and sneak snacks into her drawer, saying she was saving them for Daddy Stanley. That afternoon, the sun was especially warm. It made everything feel peaceful, almost dreamlike. Lily was lying on the carpet, drawing happily. Stanley leaned against the sofa, reading a financial magazine. Every now and then, he would glance over at us, a gentle smile resting quietly at the corners of his lips. I poured him another cup of tea. The soft sound of the teacup touching the glass table felt like music. "Stanley," I said, holding up the colorful crayon Lily had dropped. I sat down beside him. "Should we get Lily a playmate?" His hand paused mid-page. He looked at me, a warm light in his eyes, as if I had caught him by surprise. "Why are you thinking about that now?" he asked, setting the magazine aside and turning slightly to face me. He studied my expression for a moment, then smiled again. "Have you forgotten what I promised you back then?" he said softly. "Lily is my only child." I knew exactly what he meant back then. When he made that promise to me and Lily, to keep his word, he even went through that surgery. Just thinking about it still brings a dull ache to my chest. I have never forgotten. I shook my head gently and spoke in a soft voice. "But Stanley, sometimes, when Lily watches the neighbors' children playing with their younger siblings, the look in her eyes," I did not finish the sentence. I just let out a quiet sigh. Lily, who had been painting nearby, perked up when she heard us talking. She lifted her little head, her big, curious eyes blinking at us. "Mommy, Daddy Stanley, are you talking about giving me a little brother or sister?" She put down her paintbrush and came skipping over, wrapping her tiny arms around Stanley's knee. "I want one. I want a little sister. I can share half of my dolls with her." Stanley was clearly amused. He reached out and gently patted her head, the corners of his mouth lifting in a tender smile. But when he looked at me, his eyes held both hesitation and deep affection. Stanley is a man who takes his promises seriously. Once he says something, it is like he carves it into his bones. I seized the moment and nudged his arm lightly. "You see, Lily wants one too." I paused, looking straight into his eyes, and spoke with sincerity. "Stanley, I want to have another child with you. I want our family to feel just a little more complete, even though, in so many ways, it already is." He was quiet for a moment. His long fingers absent-mindedly traced the edge of the sofa's armrest. Sunlight filtered through the window panes, casting soft shadows across his strong, thoughtful profile. "I am afraid it will be too hard on you," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "I am not afraid," I whispered, taking his hand in mine. His palm was still as warm and reassuring as ever. "With you by my side, I am not afraid of anything." Later that week, Stanley nodded and scheduled another surgery. He went back to the hospital and underwent a reversal procedure. The doctor said it went well, and the recovery looked promising. But for a few days afterward, his face was pale and drawn. I worried constantly, hovering over him. Yet he was the one who comforted me, brushing it off with a quiet smile. "It is nothing," he said, "just a small bump in the road." A year later, our second daughter was born. We named her Leah, hoping she would grow up surrounded by warmth and love. Leah takes after Stanley in so many ways, especially her eyes, which are as clear as a mountain spring. Stanley adores Leah, that is certain, but when it comes to Lily, there is always a special softness in him. For instance, whenever he buys a toy for Leah, he always makes sure to get one for Lily too, often the very one Lily had been wishing for. Sometimes I tease him about it. He will laugh, pinch my cheek, and say, "Lily is the big sister." It is only fair. Stanley's mother, too, beams with joy whenever she holds little Leah in her arms. In earlier years, when Stanley was still struggling with health issues, she often sighed and apologized to me with tears in her eyes, holding my hand and whispering her guilt. But now, things had changed. Every day, she would look at Leah and say, "Cecilia, just look how sweet she is. Maybe we could try for one more." Her words made me laugh and shake my head. Stanley, of course, quickly stepped in, gently guiding her out of the room. After closing the door behind her, he looked at me and said, "Ignore her. Having Lily and Leah is more than enough for us." He paused for a second and added, "One more, and I worry you would be too tired. And besides, I think I only have enough energy to love the three of you properly." He said it with such seriousness that I could not help but smile. Still, something about the way he said it made me wonder if there was more to his words. Later that night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Stanley stepped out of the bathroom, a towel draped around his neck. His hair was still damp. He walked over to the bed like he always did, leaned down, and kissed me gently on the forehead. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pulling back the covers and climbing into bed. His arm found its place around my waist without hesitation. "I was just wondering," I murmured, snuggling closer into his chest. "Did someone really take some kind of miracle elixir back then?" His body tensed for a second, then he let out a low chuckle. His chest moved softly with laughter. "Bringing that up again," he said, pinching the tip of my nose. "Haven't you already seen the results yourself? Maybe it was just coincidence, I teased. He rolled over and pinned me gently beneath him. In the warm, dim light from the bedside lamp, his eyes looked especially deep, like the night sky, full of stars. He lowered his head, his nose brushing against mine, his breath warm. "So," he said with a husky smile, "want to try again? This time, I promise it will not be coincidence." I smiled softly as I gently pushed him away, but he caught my wrist, our fingers intertwining. He looked deeply into my eyes, his expression suddenly turning incredibly serious. "Honestly, Cecilia," he began, his voice low and steady, "sometimes I wonder if, back then, if I hadn't let go, would it have saved you a lot of pain outside?" The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying memories with it. I knew exactly what he meant. The years I was tangled up with Francis, the days filled with silence and disrespect. I shook my head, then lifted my hand to his cheek, tracing the faint stubble along his jawline with my fingertip. "Stanley, it's all in the past now. There are no ifs." I leaned closer, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. "Besides," I whispered, "if I hadn't gone through all of that, I might not be who I am today. Someone who knows exactly what she wants and stands firm in that certainty." He looked at me, eyes bright with anticipation, determined. I met his gaze, speaking each word clearly and firmly. "Determined. I love you, Stanley. I love you very, very much." For a moment, his eyes glistened with unshed tears, and the way he held me tightened, as if he wanted to melt me into his very bones and blood. After a long pause, he whispered softly into my ear, his voice solemn and heartfelt, "Cecilia, I love you too, from long, long ago to long, long after." Outside the window, the moonlight flowed gently like water, filling the entire room with its soft glow. I knew then that this was the happiness I had been searching for, simple, real, yet unbreakable. The pains and resentments of the past had vanished without a trace, dissolved in the warmth and love we shared each day. Living in the moment and cherishing those around you, that is what matters most. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.